Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Movie Mates podcast. I am Matthew, of course, joined by my wonderful co-host and best friend.
Callum.
Hey man, great to see you. So on today's show, we have a themed episode, and it's been a while since we've done a themed episode. I think up to this point we've done about 14 or 15, with our most recent one probably being probably the Voices episode. I think that was probably the
I think
most
so.
recent one, or like the sex addiction episode was pretty recent. But yeah, these are always my favorite episodes because it's usually three or four different films with one common theme, of course, by the nature of the episode. And today's is sex work. So I'm going to pass over to Cam to explain what three films today's episode entails. So yeah, off to you, mate.
Yeah, the theme episodes do often come down to be my favorite ones as well, because there's sort of no room for them to be bad films, at least in my opinion, because I've sort of handpicked them. It's usually one that I like, and then one two that I know are critical favorites. For this episode, we had a lot of popularity. We have two very successful videos on the channel, not with audience engagement, but with sheer views. And that's The Planet of the Apes Part 3 and Sex Addiction. So clearly, sex sells, sex and
So
monkeys. We're leaning into the sex today, not the monkeys. I know they're apes. Don't come for me. Uh,
I'm really excited
but
for it. Yeah,
we once again, it's just a tenuous link for us to talk about three good films, in my opinion. In Matthew's opinion, two good films. He's done it again. I've given him one of my favorite films of all time. He's going to take a big fat dump on it, so you have that to look forward to. We're talking about Midnight Cowboy. We're talking about Boogie Nights, and we're talking about The Escort. The Escort, I imagine not many of you have heard of. I imagine not everybody will listen to the review. But if you have no interest in seeing the film and don't mind getting it spoiled, you probably want to hear Matthew's opinions on it because they're probably not favorable.
this could be the final ever episode of the podcast if Callum and I's friendship comes to an exclusive end, with my take on The Escort. But on a serious note, yeah, like obviously these three films are very different. They come out at different time periods, and there is similarities there. But I think this is going to be a really interesting slate to talk about because all three of them are like so even tonally different. So
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be really good. And
Yeah, I
yeah,
would have thrown some stripping into the mix, but that's a whole episode of its
of
own that I
course,
have
yeah,
planned.
definitely, and I think people will probably be a little bit surprised. Like as soon as people see the title and and stuff like that in their subscription boxes in YouTube, like it might widen a few eyes or whatever. But we try to talk about these themes in a serious way. So we do, but also by the nature of the podcast, we like to have a joke, a respectful joke as well. So we always like to have a laugh and but also critically analyze the films too. So I'm really looking forward to getting into them. But yeah, just before we kick off today's show, thank you very much for everyone who supported us recently. If you haven't seen our latest podcast, we reviewed Black Widow, probably one of the biggest films of the year. So go check that out. I think it ended up being like an hour and a half, mate. It was a long pod, but I really enjoyed it. It was a good MCU chat at the end there too. And yeah, this will be our 98th podcast. So if for our 100th episode, as you've probably seen or heard, we're going to be doing like a Q&A. So please be sure to leave a comment on this video or any other recent video. And for any questions or suggestions for that episode, we'll be there to answer them. And yeah, time codes on our email and our iTunes link is in the description too. So the first film, mate, Midnight Cowboy, is a late 60s, isn't it? It's quite an early one.
69, because
Yeah.
me and my dad had this argument because he's a big fan of this film, and he says he'll be listening to this episode. But he thought it was 70s. We agreed it was postgraduate, but I came out the victor in that discussion. So this is one of his favorites. So he's been pushing me to watch this film, and I was really excited in advance. And after having seen it, it did give me shades of The Graduate, which became one of
Definitely.
my favorite films. And
Yeah.
it's not just the presence of Dustin Hoffman. I looked it up almost expecting it to be the same director because just tonally it sort of cried out to me as as sort of a similar film. And that this is one I really would have loved to have seen in the cinema, honestly.
It's got a really special vibe to it, mate. I think you're right. And it's unbelievable that this film came out only 2 years after The Graduate, and yet Dustin Hoffman gives this exuberance of being like 15 to 20 years older just through his performance alone. Like he looks exactly the same, but somehow like through the physicality of the performance, like he seems like totally different. And it's
Yeah.
bizarre. I think almost this film fits so well into the Graduate universe. Like in my opinion, you could just make that connection straight away.
Mm.
It just
Yeah, because
feels,
Benjamin is this sort of like petulant wanker, and then
you can see him becoming a con man as
Rizzo
well.
is sort of this street smart con man. So yeah, there's a potential development of that being one character, I suppose.
Yeah, and I mean, it's worth saying as well. I think this film had won Best Picture, Director, and Adapted Screenplay. Like it got the hat trick. It did incredibly well critically at the Academy Awards.
Yeah, I didn't know that it won those. I knew it was nominated, but very, very impressive and unsurprising. But based on how much I love this, and as soon as it started playing, I was like, wow. I just sort of breathed in the poor quality of the visual and just felt this real sense of charm. That I feel only for films that look like pure shit.
Yeah, I know. Like it's maybe not the best visual quality, I suppose.
But that's due to age. If it looks like shit due to poor
Yeah,
execution of your job, that's on you. But this is impeccable for the era.
yeah, it adds to the charm, I think, as well. You know what I mean? It adds to the era. It makes you feel part of that era, doesn't it? So, yeah.
Yeah, this film surprised me a lot. In multiple ways. The first initially was that structurally it massively surprised me because the first bulk of the film is dedicated to Joe Buck, which really surprised me because Dustin Hoffman was sort of the star compared to Jon Voight. But in reality, the star of the film is Joe Buck, and we learned so much about Joe through dialogue and flashback. Especially on his bus journey to New York before we even meet Rizzo.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing because you kind of go in like you said with Dustin Hoffman being in this film and you kind of go in thinking he's the main character, but it's anything but that really for the first half. And obviously Rizzo gets more to do as the film goes on and becomes more integral to Joe Buck. And just they almost become like dependent on each other throughout the film, which I thought was really really good. And the Joe and Rizzo dynamic is fantastic. One thing I kind of want to mention here about the film is I think this is a very easy one to remake, respectfully as a classic. You know what I mean? There's a
How
lot
dare
of,
you, sir?
well, yeah, I know, but I think there's so many sort of, actors and performances here that I can sort of, create in my head like a modern representation of it. When I think of Joe Buck straight away, like I can kind of imagine like a Jesse Plemons type actor playing him in some kind of
Okay.
picture, or with Dustin Hoffman, you've got a wide array of actors who could, I think, capture that. But the dynamic that these two actors share and the chemistry they have is I don't think you can ever sort of recapture that. To be honest, it's so special, and it actually blew my mind in this film that the most famous scene, I'm walking here. I wasn't sure if that
Mm-hmm.
was because I've heard a few things about this, mate, like whether it was real, whether it was staged. But one thing I would say off the bat is like I didn't know it was from this film. Never mind, how real and incredible it was. I just didn't know that this was from Midnight Cowboy. I didn't. Did you know it was from this film?
I'd seen the scene before, so yeah, I was aware, but I wasn't aware that it was, sort of the coining of that phrase in regards to sort of the stereotype of New Yorkers.
Yeah.
So yeah, the context was different than I realized, but I was aware that was a scene within this film. So does Dustin Hoffman sort of put forward that a car nearly did hit him and then he yelled at the car?
Yeah, because like I rewatched that scene
Mm,
maybe like five times, and I you do hear the accent change. Like Rizzo's got a very different accent naturally to Dustin, so it was quite bizarre when you hear that accent change when you replay the scene back. But I don't know, it seems like a bit weird that was left in if that was the case. I do get it, like it
mm.
adds to the performance and adds to the flow of the scene, but I would be absolutely amazed if that was real. Like that would blow my mind if that had happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with the accent because he goes from sort of this like meek, weaselly accent to like full on Italian New Yorker stereotype.
Yeah,
And that has become popularized as the phrase of choice. It's as intrinsic as pop a shrimp on the barbie for Australians.
yeah,
But I know he says that it's an improvised line. I don't think the fact that there was a car there is improvised.
yeah,
I don't know about
yeah,
that. I
yeah.
feel like we sort of talked about this with David Harbour and Black Widow, that he told a story about an element that he added to the film, and whether that's true or whether that's good PR, who knows? But either way,
Yeah.
it is good PR.
Makes for an
And
interesting plot.
here, you talked about sort of the walking along New York scenes, and we talk a lot about music here. And I think the everybody's talking as a theme song for this film for me does rival "If You Want to Sing Out" for Harold and Maude, and "The Sound of Silence" for The Graduate. Like I think it is
Yeah.
baked into the DNA of this film.
Yeah, definitely, man. That's a great point because I always think all great movies, in my mind, like most of them have a great soundtrack or at least a great sort of song that comes straight to your mind when you think about it. And it really does help to create that artistic style. And I think the film's editing really helps with that. Like there's a lot of, sort of really quick jump cuts almost. Like it is very similar to The Graduate. Like there's a lot of scenes that remind me of, that opening interaction um between Ben. It is Ben, isn't it? In The Graduate
Mm-hmm.
and Mrs. Robinson, when the quick cuts and stuff and in the bedroom, like it really did remind me of that. And yeah, like it's so difficult not to compare to The Graduate. The Dustin Hoffman comparison is obvious, but even despite that, like if he wasn't in this film, like I would still compare it to that because it is so tonally similar. Like it's got that kind of, there's just an underlying sort of depressed energy that you kind of get. Like you kind of get that things
Yeah.
will not be good, like an Of Mice and Men style sort of looming tragedy towards the end. Like it does remind me of
Mm-hmm.
that. I suppose in that sense, like the George and Lenny dynamic from that film and book is rather similar to the Joe and Rizzo dynamic here, with one relying on the other for sort of emotional and physical support as the film progresses.
Yeah. To begin with, Rizzo's sort of the intelligent, questionably manipulative one. The depending on how you look at the relationship between Lenny and George, could be argued. So they sort of take on that dynamic, and then as you said, it's sort of flipped by the end where one becomes the caretaker of the other in sort of a surprising turn of events. And Joe is obviously a sex worker within this film. It's his job to convince the ladies that he's worth their time and their money. And I had this preconception that he was going to be this guy with this rural charm that then is taken advantage of by this Rizzo character. But then we see his attempts to get people to have sex with him, and they're painful.
Unsuccessful. Yeah.
I can't believe he had any success. I mean, the second person that we see him hit on immediately has sex with him, and I really don't think the "can you point me in the direction of the Statue of Liberty" line is going to work on anyone.
Yeah, and there's with that, mate, there's a really uncomfortable scene, isn't there, with like a cinema with I don't know if you could call it a client of his, because it certainly doesn't, it's not like the relationship isn't exactly reciprocated. But in that sense, Joe, part of me thought, oh, he is gonna kill him here or something, or he's gonna take his watch, but I'm kind of glad they didn't, because I think deep down he probably is a nice guy. But it's just so poetically like beautiful, the fact that you've got this cowboy in New York. Like the cowboy is kind of the old fashioned America. Do you know what I mean? Like it's very classic, sort of old school, whereas like set in New York at the time, obviously it's quite a conflict of interest, quite a what's the word? It's kind of the antithesis of each other. You know what I mean? You've got like old
Mm-hmm.
America and new America, so it's great, mate. It's great, but there are some uncomfortable scenes in here for sure.
Yeah, he doesn't exactly have, I'm sure we'll be talking about, their success within their chosen industries. Here it's male prostitution, then we have pornography in Boogie Nights, and then we have female prostitution in the Escort. You know, I just don't think he has a strong business model. He asks
Dragon's
for
Den,
money
mate.
after the fact, and
I'm
then
out.
he gives them money when they won't give him money. I think he's losing it, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I don't think his business would last long, mate. To be honest with you,
No, I don't think his Dragon's Den pitch would go well.
no, I don't think Peter Jones or Deborah Meaden would be all for that business idea, mate. I think you're right.
You know, there's a lot of actions within this film that are easily condemnable. By the end, we aren't sure whether Joe has committed a murder. Rizzo commits various hustles throughout the film, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't impressed by the slickness with which Rizzo performs his hustles.
Yeah, yeah, I respect the hustle there. And they are just like hustlers, aren't they? Just trying to get by any means necessary. It's such a interesting dynamic. And like one thing throughout the film that I was sort of curious of as well is like the underlying, like I don't know if you got this, but kind of thought there was maybe like a like an underlining sort of theme of bisexuality in Joe's part. Do you know what I mean? Like I thought I don't know if you got that or maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but I kind of thought there was potentially certainly hinting at that strongly.
Yeah, I don't know how many Midnight Cowboy fans are going to love that assertion, but that was exactly the thing I was going to say next. Rizzo pictures his future, and he's
Yeah.
Running along that beach like Apollo Creed and Rocky and Rocky
Yeah,
3.
I
And
was about to
it's just
say.
the homoeroticism is electric.
It is.
And I was really moved by how Rizzo saw his future with Joe, despite them sort of getting off to a rocky start. And it is just so tragic. By the end, it's Rizzo's death honestly broke my heart, and I don't know why, because he's not a good guy, throughout the film. But I think I just wanted them to have a future because they were both clearly just complicated people with difficult pasts, and they saw a brighter future with each other.
Yeah.
And the fact
yeah.
The fact that they weren't able to pursue that is quite tragic.
And with that, mate, like I think the fact that you feel so much sympathy for Rizzo as well, and Joe, and some of the things they do, like some of the things they do aren't very nice. Do you know what I mean? But the fact that the movie still makes you like them and sort of be sad when these bad things happen to them, it's a credit to the movie in itself, especially by the end, because when the camera stopped rolling, I kind of thought, oh, where's Joe going to go next? Do you know what I mean? Like I kind of thought you kind of want that happy ending for him, but you never really get it, which is sad.
Yeah. One good time the Joe is able to have is he has some more sex near the end of the film.
Yeah.
And this time he actually gets paid, so big win.
Yeah.
And it's a physically uncomfortable sex scene. Not just to watch, but actually for Joe himself. And I really hope for romance for Joe. Obviously, in a film in the 1960s, you can put as many hints as you want, but they're not going to have an on-screen gay romance. That wasn't something that was really seen until the 2000s, with sort of Brokeback Mountain. That was sort of the big the proper big screen first gay romance that I can recall. So if he doesn't get to have love with Rizzo, I wanted him to have love with someone. And I just felt sad that that woman saw it as transactory,
Yeah.
as sort of money changing hands, as was intended. I thought maybe romance would develop off the back of that.
Yeah, definitely, I get you. And on the subject of the homosexuality thing, I had read somewhere on this film that the only reason why it was given like an X rating was because of those themes in it that had to be sort of
Right.
removed, and they had to remove other things. So I kind of feel like it's bizarre because when you compare it to other films, if you even compare it to The Graduate, like I mean, there's some like raunchy scenes here, but I wouldn't say it's like over the top or anything, or it's like it does enough to justify that rating. You know what I mean? I think it's on par with The Graduate, if I can recall, and there's certainly other films we're going to be talking about today where I know they're a different time period, but they're a bit more explicit, shall we say? So I mean, it's bizarre. Do you know what I mean? And I'm with you on that one, Callum. Like you did kind of want that romance and that like prosperity for Joe, and it's a pity because I think a continuation of the story is what I would have wanted, but obviously we're never going to get it now, so it's kind of it's up to your own imaginations.
Yeah, censorship back in the day was really baffling, because it's like they're saying, yeah, you can have references to being gay, you can have sequences of gay sex or gay oral sex, but we have to have it at the highest rating conceivable. You would think they would say, that's not something we want represented in any films, or you can see it from any age where any sex is able to be seen.
Yeah.
So it's weird that they were like, yeah, you can see it, but you have to be a certain age. Like it's just
Yeah, it's
you know,
bizarre. Yeah,
it's sort of it doesn't mesh sensically with me. You know, if you're like, well, it's gay sex, so only the really old people can see it. And I'm
yeah,
like, well,
it's bizarre.
you
It's like
know,
it's kind
if
of
your
like a
issue is
taboo
with
subject,
it
isn't
being
it?
gay, yeah, like it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah,
Just let everyone see what represents everyone. You
yeah,
know,
agreed. Yeah,
like there were a lot of issues with you know, the character of Alan being referenced in A Streetcar Named Desire, which, you know, ended up with that film being sort of gutted of any depth. You know, the film is, you know, good in its own merit, but, you know, when you read the play compared to that, you know, what was, you know, sort of cut out was really integral. And it was
yeah.
kind
I
of
know
unfortunate.
it's baffling to me that it is such a taboo subject, given that there's millions across the people. Oh, sorry, that sounds it. There's millions of people across America that like engaged in that, and it's not, it shouldn't be a taboo subject. You know what I mean? Like there's loads of serious themes that cinema's explored, so why not explore that? Do you know what I mean? But I mean, yeah, that's the 60s and 70s for you, mate, I suppose, isn't it? Especially with American cinema, you know what I mean? Like there was a lot that was off limits that they just didn't want to share stories about, which I mean, yeah, it's unfortunate because like I think a lot of films like Streetcar Named Desire as well, like they kind of lack that kind of depth with those themes. And by this film, I think this film would have could have done a lot more to answer a lot of questions that we potentially have surrounding them. But I mean, I think it did a good job at kind of underlining those themes in a subtle enough way where you can still kind of acknowledge it and address it and analyze it, if you know what I mean. But I mean, yeah, it's kind of a heartbreaking film, mate, because it is just depressing as well. You know what I mean? It's like I would kind of liken it to Of Mice and Men, where like you love the characters for all their flaws, but you can't help but feel like they're not going to get a happy ending. So it's horrible, but yeah,
Yeah, you know, I'd say my favorite sequence within the film, and just because it felt so out of place, but you know, I kind of appreciate that sometimes, you know, because I would say the entire third act of The Graduate, I think that was mainly like your main issue with it was that sort of the first two thirds were this, you know, sort of cerebral, cynical look at life outside of your sort of inner suburban circle, and then the third act is like this, you know, traditional stop the wedding romantic comedy.
yeah, yeah,
And I like that because, you know, it sort of reflected Benjamin being sort of a mentally disjointed character. And, you know, that was sort of replicated in the structure of the film. And here, you know, certain things don't mesh with the tone of the film, and that absolutely works for me.
yeah,
And the scene I'm talking about is uh the drug and sex party, which comes you know, near the third act, where Joe picks up I think his first successful paying client. You know, so I mean, this is an episode about sex work. He doesn't get paid for a lot of it. You know, I think he performs. You know, I think that's his like third sexual act performed in the or you know
yeah,
performed or received within the film, and it's the first time he's actually paid. But you know, my favorite moment within that because I think the sequence is just teeming with comedy, honestly.
mm-hmm.
And it's when John Voight walks up wearing glasses and says, guess who it is, and then he
Yeah.
just takes the most. It's me. You know,
It's
like
really well
I don't
delivered.
know.
Yeah,
For some reason that was just really heartwarming.
yeah, that's
Because
really well
up
delivered.
to that point the film was so incredibly depressing, and then as soon as that sequence is over, you're right back to depressing. You know, it's
Yeah,
like this guy is sort of unintelligent and naive, and he just wants to make a living knowing doing what he knows he's good at, and then he's sort of taken under the wing by this guy who's already facing disease and depression within the city, and then in the final act his friend actually dies, so it is just a
yeah,
mess of depression throughout the film, and that's
yeah,
sort of the only glint of hope within it,
yeah.
aside from the hopes that they have for the future that they never actually get to fulfill.
I agree, mate, to be honest. And I mean, yeah, I think what makes this film so good is that there's a lot of scenes that if you said them out on paper, people probably wouldn't think they make sense together. Like there's a lot of scenes in here that are sort of meshed into one, but they all fit cohesively really well because the tone is so consistent, but the scenes themselves have there's certain scenes that have a lot of levity, and there's certain scenes that just seem so ludicrous that they couldn't possibly happen. But that's what makes this film so great. And yeah, there is that sort of overarching sort of just depressing narrative there, but it is interspersed with those sort of scenes of humor and ultimately like the bond that the two share really carries the film, to be honest.
Talking about it, I'm looking forward to watching it again, honestly.
Yeah, I know, because talking about The Graduate there as well, as I say to you, like I've been really getting back into my reading, and I know you've read The Graduates, and I know you said it was a lot sort of like
Got halfway through. It was kind of insufferable. I'm not gonna lie.
yeah, because I know you had said it was quite sort of speech based in the sense that it was like a screenplay almost, you know what I mean, rather than like a
Hmm.
descriptive novel. So it'll be
Yeah,
interesting to
the
see what
fact
it's
the
like.
fact that the screenwriters of The Graduate received an Oscar for their screenwriting is one of the most hilarious and undeserving awards that's ever been given out because they literally just hit copy and paste on the book.
Yeah, that's mad, man. And it's a pretty short book as well, isn't it? So you could probably get it done in less than a week or a couple of days. So
Yeah, I mean I'm a slow reader, but yeah, it's only 180 pages or so.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's good, man. That's good. I'll check it out. I suppose it's also worth noting. I think Midnight Cowboy is based on a book, if I'm correct. I
It
think
is,
it
yeah.
is, yeah. So I might have to pick that one up and give that a wee read once I finish the other book I'm reading. So, I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't have anything more to say on the film. Anything from yourself?
Just a little bit. This is the first time I've ever seen Dustin Hoffman play a character that I haven't felt great disdain for. In this film, he just broke my heart on so many occasions. There's the moment before they head to the party, and he says, "I'm not dressed for a party," and it's just,
Yeah,
and
it's
him talking about
heartbreaking.
the fact that due to whatever sickness he has, he may not be able to walk anymore, and that coupled with whatever physical disability that he has, it kind of goes unspecified. But he just broke my heart on so many occasions. And, my assumption going in was that Rizzo was this hustler, and that he'd be pimping Joe out, manipulating this like innocent and unintelligent man. But then their friendship was just so beautiful, and Rizzo's death just had me asking why. Like
Yeah,
it was just the final nail in the coffin of breaking me throughout this film.
yeah.
I didn't expect to love it. It's sort of been hyped up by my dad, but then it exceeded every expectation.
Yeah, I definitely, especially when like Joe's speaking to Rizzo and then you hear that he doesn't reply, it's kind of it sinks in then. And with that, mate, there's one of my favorite scenes in the film involving Rizzo was when he sort of sets up Joe with this like religious fanatic who ends up quartering him in his house and like asking him to pray. And there's part of me definitely thought that scene was gonna go sexual because like there's some weird sort of innuendos found in that scene where like
Yeah,
get on your knees and stuff or whatever. Like it's a bit bizarre, it's a bit funny. But I mean, yeah, and then you just see Rizzo in the train just escaping. It's fantastic. It is bizarre to me that like throughout the film, like the only read because it's suppose it's worth noting for people who haven't seen it. Like, Joe and Rizzo actually meet quite early on in the film, but then they go their separate ways once Rizzo sort of betrays him. Well, betrays maybe a bit harsh, but yeah, lies to him. But then they actually have a chance encounter again, which in I think it's like a coffee shop or something. But yeah, like Rizzo's he's such a little bastard, but you love him for it. You know what I mean? Like he's fantastic. Dustin Hoffman's great. He really is good.
yeah, and clearly, he's become embittered to the world because he's never received, an ounce of respect in his life. He obviously, in some instances, is asking for it, especially, in his use of homophobic slurs. People calling him ratso in response to that is, apt, honestly, because you do think, well, what a piece of shit. But then, the more tragic he becomes as a character, the more you feel for him.
Yeah,
Despite his many obvious faults. But it did just feel tragic in the end that even in the credits he's credited as Ratso. So even the film doesn't
even the
have respect
film.
for
Yeah,
him.
yeah,
Like
that's
it, it,
brilliant.
it
Yeah,
was painful.
yeah, yeah. That's such a good point, actually. Yeah, it's so bizarre, like hearing that word, like the F word on camera. Like it's such a bizarre. I really don't like it at all. It unsettles me, even if it's like the
Hmm.
film's critiquing that. Do you know what I mean? It's not a nice. It's horrible, isn't it? But yeah, like it's. I think the only film I remember in recent memory that used that word was like It Chapter Two, and even I was unsettled by it then. You know what I mean? It's not nice, but um, yeah, at least the film makes an attempt to criticize it, I suppose. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, because I think they become better people once they meet each other.
yeah, yeah, that's true. That's very true. Yeah, they sort of help each other in that sense.
I don't have anything else on the film either. So if you want to go into ratings.
Yeah, sure. For me, mate, as I say, like this film, is incredible. I haven't seen the rest of the slate for the Academy Awards in 1969, but I'm sure it deserved Best Picture, Director, and Adapted Screenplay. It's absolutely incredible. It's definitely inspired me probably to pick up the book in a few months' time. and it's really well edited, and it's just fantastic and brilliant performances. So it's probably going to have to be an 8.5 for me. Really good, solid film. What about you, mate?
As soon as I saw The Graduate, it immediately cracked the top 10. And, as my dad told me it would, I think that this film is, superior to The Graduate. I think it is an easy comparison, not only because of era, but also Dustin Hoffman brings a certain energy to every movie he's in. So I'd have to give the film like a 9.5 out of 10.
Yeah,
like I did really connect with it.
Yeah, I'd love to do a retrospective sort of top 5 films of maybe each decade or something one day. And once we've seen all the major ones, you know what I mean? I think there'll be some good chats in there, especially the 60s. Like there's so many good ones so far that we've reviewed in the channel that are phenomenal. So yeah. One film, probably the film I was most excited to talk to you about today, mate, is Boogie Nights, a film I hadn't heard of. To be honest, none of these films I'd heard of before you'd decided to put him on the podcast to watch. But I'm so glad you did, because this film is so weird. It's so wacky, but it's just incredibly funny.
I mean, I have made, reference from time to time to Dirk Diggler's famously huge dick. In school, for example, where a few teachers overheard, and that drew some attention. When you don't quite have the context. But yeah, this film sort of acts as a, Godfather or Goodfellas-esque, decades sprawling saga that chronicles the rise and fall of a character within a certain industry. And it's just incredible. I saw the runtime, it being, over 2.5 hours long, and I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, I was a bit
Same.
off put by that idea, because we've sort of been burned in the past with The Godfather, which is, it's really well made, but it's just not a fun watch. And it kind of just meanders to the finish, and you can kind of respect the journey that Michael went on, but then a lot of the stuff around it is just sort of unnecessary padding. Sorry. It looks great, some iconic moments, but a lot of it is just padding and meandering.
I mean, I look back at that Godfather podcast and like, I don't know how I bloody sat through those 3 films. To be honest with you, like, I don't know like what was going on there. I can't believe I did that. But yeah, it's nice to say that you've watched them, to be fair, though. You know what I mean? Like, it's nice to say.
To be fair, the first one, I think you cut out some parts of it. It's tighter. It's more about Michael. Great. Second one, you take out all the flashbacks because they're absolutely useless, because they're about a character that's dead already. Doesn't matter. Not a character we're interested in. He's had his iconic moments. He doesn't need further development. Take out the flashbacks. You're down to 2 hours. First one, cut out an hour of the shit. Third one, cut out the incest storyline. Perfect trilogy.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Smashed it.
Like the third film, people really shout on Sofia Coppola's performance. I think it's perfectly admirable for the lines that she's delivering, which are, oh my God, I fancy my cousin so much. Like, how is she meant to play that?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's settling her up for failure almost. This film, however, I think you're right, it does have that Godfather comparison, and it feels quite similar to like a Tarantino-esque film. You know what I mean? Like just a lot of just sort of explicit action. You know what I mean? But it's also got that really just say it how it is, wear your heart in your sleeves type characters who just say whatever they want. And the cast is incredible. I mean, Mark Wahlberg, Julianne Moore, Don Cheadle, Burt Reynolds. I mean, the list goes on. And it's just, yeah, I mean, it's such a special film to me because it's on paper, it sounds so ridiculous. Like, it sounds like this film cannot be good. Like, it sounds like a mockery of itself, but it's actually quite a deep character study because a lot of characters have a lot going on. And yeah, it's told from a lot of different perspectives in a sense as well. Like, you get the kind of sense that this isn't like Mark Wahlberg's film at all. It's kind of like the team's film, if you get me. Like, Mark Wahlberg wouldn't be the main character in this, in my opinion. I think it is kind of like a team dynamic. What do you think about that?
Yeah, because he anchors the storyline. It's his rise and fall. It's Dirk Diggler's story. But yeah, everybody surrounding him supplements that, and it's Jack's storyline, I guess, because he's the one that indoctrinates all these people into the industry, and then it's as much his journey. It's more a journey of welcoming him in, and then forgiving him. It's the rise and fall of that relationship, and he's as integral to that as Dirk Diggler is.
Yeah, definitely, mate, definitely. And it's worth noting as well, like, this is probably one of the most wacky notes I've ever written in the sort of written for the podcast, but it's worth noting here that Mark Wahlberg plays Eddie Adams, who plays Dirk Diggler, who plays Brock Landers. Like there's a lot of like, you know, different kind of sort of Inception sort of style things going on there. Like it's on paper, this film sounds so ludicrous and ridiculous, but I would advise anyone who hasn't seen it to watch it, because it's just crazy fun. It's fantastic. It's great to watch.
Would you say that this is the best movie about making movies?
I would say it's certainly up there with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Like when you watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you kind of realize it's kind of like the Joker King of Comedy style scenario, where like you love the because you watch the modern version first, and you kind of think, oh yeah, this is fantastic. This is definitely going to be better than the old film. Then you watch the old film that was clearly used for inspiration, and you kind of think, oh, hold on here, the old film is way better. Like I Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I maybe the comparison's not as obvious when you think of the Joker King of Comedy dynamic, but I watched this film and I kind of thought, oh, this is way better than Tarantino's film. Like this, you know what I mean? Like I think this is the best film about making movies. Certainly up there. You know what I mean? I don't think anything really comes close.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can both agree Mank is fine, and the Disaster Artist I think is hilarious. But there's nothing that quite creates sort of this saga. Like this film. It really feels like a trilogy within one film. It feels like what the Godfather, what the good parts of the Godfather accomplished. This great narrative, for Michael that maybe didn't end the way that I wanted it to. But, it did effectively create this, decades spanning narrative for this one character, and this film was able to effectively do that within 2.5 hours.
I mean, it's incredible. It's incredibly well done, and just when you think the movie can't get any funnier, any crazy, like another actor shows up or another weird scene starts, and it actually made me have a deep love for Don Cheadle, actually, because I never really got the hype behind him around the MCU, but like he's actually a bloody great actor, to be honest with you. He's actually class in this film. Fair play to him.
Yeah, we're sort of his big introduction scene is where he's it's not the first time we see him, but where we sort of get a look into his character is where he's selling where he's selling audio equipment within a tech store. And I was just wondering, like, have you ever like walked into a shop and had someone like pitch to you why you should buy this thing? Because like, is that only a thing in America? Because I've never encountered that in my life.
I've had experiences where maybe someone said, and I've had experiences like when people have come up to me to like go to like join this religion or something. Like that sounds like really weird.
Oh yeah,
but like
and then there was the dude that like pitched us laser tag or something, or paintballing or something, like
in Comic-Con
Square.
I suppose it would be more common, like for people to say bring Jesus into your heart rather than buy this PlayStation or something. You know what I mean? But like I kind of think of an example. I mean, it's probably happened maybe a few times, but like probably the similarity would probably be like if I'm in a shop or something and someone says like, do you have a HMV card? No. Oh, would you like one? And then 10 minutes later I've set up an account with HMV or something. Like it's that kind of thing. But yeah, it's quite bizarre that he's kind of got this pitch for Dragon's Den style pitch, ironically enough, for the electrical stuff.
I mean, I guess maybe it's just because we have the internet now, so we have all the data and the facts on the things before we buy them, and we usually buy them on the internet. But even in person, we know exactly what we're getting, and we're just looking for that one thing, and nothing else will do. So I mean, but I mean, you must go into that situation knowing that it's like a bullshit pitch to upsell you.
Yeah, surely you probably would. Yeah, it's bizarre. It's funny.
Surprisingly quickly, Eddie's indoctrinated into the family. And he has his first job, and we see just truly how dreadful the acting is, but between the characters. Not of course Mark Wahlberg acting as Eddie Adams, but Eddie Adams acting as Dirk Diggler, acting as whatever he was auditioning for within that first film. And honestly, I expected the acting to be better. Amber's meant to be a pro, but the acting, Jack seemed really committed to telling a story. And I was fully convinced by that. And he seems so proud of the Brock Landers films. He says that this is what he wants to be remembered by. But I mean, come on, have some perspective. The acting is dog shit.
Yeah, it's bizarre because like, was this like I think Mark Wahlberg does such a great job at portraying someone as a bad actor. I mean, that's a skill in itself. I have a few questions to ask you. one was like, was this Mark Wahlberg's big break? And two, was this before or after Jurassic Park for Julianne Moore?
So this was 1997, and she was in The Lost World, Jurassic Park. It would have been, I think, the same year, or 1998 maybe.
Yeah.
In around there. So yeah, it probably would have been, a big film for her, obviously, because this is one that actually, got good critical attention. I do think this would have been Mark Wahlberg's film break, but obviously he had a musical career before that as Marky Mark. So I don't think it was his sort of shot to stardom, but I think it was definitely his big debut in film.
I never knew Marky Mark. That's the first time I've ever heard of that in my life. That's fantastic. Marky Mark?
Yeah,
Was it like a Connor for
I
real?
don't know how you haven't heard that.
Was it like a Connor for real situation, or was he actually like, was it like an Ant and Dec sort of PJ and Duncan style thing?
Oh, like it wasn't taking the piss. Like I think he was fully serious about it. Like there was no, I don't think there was a shred of irony in it.
Fantastic. Oh my, I'll have to check him out. I'll have to check it out. One
You
thing
know,
about, oh, go ahead, mate. Sorry, you go ahead. You go ahead.
well, I just wanted to address the aesthetic of the film because the film came out in 1997, I believe. I hope I haven't messed that up. But the film opens in the 70s, and I've never really watched anything that's authentically 1970s. So the aesthetic was sort of something new to me, but it was something that I massively appreciated.
Yeah, no, it was really, really good, mate. Like it brings you right into that era, and like the porn industry is not something I know a lot about, but it certainly seems like such a wild. Shake your a little shake of that. It was
Sorry,
fantastic.
that's coming through my iPad.
It was
That was James. That was James Corden talking about Weight Watchers. Which
no, you're okay. Yeah, it's not an understand I know a lot about. And it certainly seems like such a wild sort of ride there. And I get, this film isn't like a documentary, but there's, I'd imagine some of the scenes here are pretty like, accurate in terms of how these things are made and the different like the party like atmosphere that goes on behind the scenes. And Burt Reynolds' character Jack, like I kind of had this image in my head that like he was going to be a real asshole, like, and he's not exactly a nice guy, but like you kind of expect him to be like this big villain, and by the end he has a big twist where he betrays everyone for money, but he ends up just accepting Eddie back into the family, and he seems like a nice guy who has integrity about his work. You know what I mean? He actually seems like a nice guy, to be honest.
yeah, he's a true filmmaker, and no matter your opinion on the pornography industry, of course, back in that era they were trying more so to tell a story. So I mean, they were closer to cinema,
Yeah.
And of course they were at the time, and in certain places now still are projected into cinemas. As seen in Taxi Driver, for example, where Travis Bickle takes his date on the worst date conceivable that you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
That I don't think that's, you'd really have to like feel that out. I think you need to get a sense of a person before you immediately
Right,
leap to
yeah, exactly.
porn theater date.
Yeah.
You think
It's
take her
not
for some
first date
drinks,
material.
maybe gauge the interest before
Certainly.
full commitment to that, full
Certainly.
commitment to making sure she never sees you again.
Yeah, certainly, mate, certainly. I think one thing about this film that I really enjoyed is just the unusual tone of it. And a lot of scenes are so uncomfortable, but they're played for laughs. And there's one specific scene that really jumps out in my head is like Eddie's confrontation with his mother, who like kicks him out. It's like it's a really horrible scene because you get a sense of how his mom is just like so horrible to him. You know what I mean? And like you feel so bad for him. Like he just ends up. And to be fair, by the end, he does prove everyone wrong. You know what I mean? He ends up being like the most successful sort of actor in that industry in America. So, yeah, I mean, I thought it was really sort of strangely sort of emotional, that bit as well of the film.
Yeah, because I thought it was going to be that he would be the issue. I thought he was going to be getting into the porn industry because he wasn't good at anything else, and because he had no ambition or drive, which of course is not my opinion of people who go into pornography. That was my opinion of what this character was going to be based on the fact that he was played by Mark Wahlberg. No offense,
Yeah.
but the fact that he's committing hard to doing two jobs, was really respectable. His mom was constantly, you know, emotionally abusive about the fact that he never finished high school. But I mean, there's a incredibly admirable, dedication to work. That he was able to, come home late at night, leave early in the morning, do two jobs. It seemed to be more than she was doing.
Yeah, it's really a real sense of humanity to his character, mate, to be honest with you. And as I say, I think this is probably my favorite performance of Mark Wahlberg that I've certainly seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is surprising, how he has such a capacity to play likable characters. It is just it's very surprising. I really liked his character in Instant Family. Where he played this, really caring husband who really liked the kids that they fostered. He can play a really nice guy. But then on the opposite you have Cade Yeager and Mark Wahlberg's seeming actual personality.
Yeah, yeah. In interviews, in interviews he's quite hit or miss, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he did used to have a section of his Wikipedia that was labeled hate crimes, and it's recently been changed to legal issues. And it just shocks me that all of usually it's that someone has a great amazing career and then they do something that really messes with it. You had Alec Baldwin had certain controversies, Mel Gibson had certain controversies, Liam Neeson recently has sort of struggled to get his career back from comments that he made recently. And it just shocks me that someone was able to have that sort of past, and then after that, very recently after that, was able to kick off a career. I mean, it was like at ages like 16, 18 that he really got into big trouble. Because I mean, of course there's Robert Downey Jr., but he served his time in prison, and he really recovered. But, Mark Wahlberg, if you just look at his Wikipedia, like don't take my word for it. I don't want to kick the guy, but just do some research for yourself and form your own opinion, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I wouldn't be super educated in that, but you do hear stories of these kind of things, and it's bizarre that he is still able to be one of the top grossing actors in the world at the minute. Like, to be fair, maybe he's changed, I don't know, but I'm sure I'm sure he's just lived a quite I don't know, I was about to say just a strange life. A strange life, because like you see interviews of him like being drunk and Graham Norton as well. I'm not sure if that was if he was actually drunk, but I don't know.
I'd put money on it.
Yeah. One thing about this film that I really enjoyed is kind of the surprising element of a lot of scenes. I mean, there's one specific that comes into my head. I don't know what this guy was called, but I just labeled him the cuck. Where the cuck sort of like shoots.
I don't know the character's name, but he's played by William H. Macy.
Yeah, really well, by the way. And so throughout the film, there's kind of like a recurring motif of him catching his wife in the middle of having sex with someone else, like cheating on him, kind of thing. And I just love the eventual sort of snap where he just shoots the wife and the boyfriend or whatever, and then himself. Like, it's kind of a little bit. It's very distressing, because you kind of think like, oh god, like it's played for laughs, but that guy's probably really emotionally scarred from that. You know what I mean? But it's kind of just played for laughs, and then that's kind of the point in the film where like the downward spiral kicks in, really, for me.
Yeah, there's a lot of darkness within the film, and it's obviously consistent with the truth of the industry at the time. And I sort of appreciated having this lighthearted joke, and then when it sort of then turned into something dark as well. I sort of preferred it when it was that moment of levity, that sort of shred of light amongst all the darkness. It was sort of in the more optimistic act of the film, which is the first act, when Eddie's just sort of kicking off his career, and he's meeting a lot of success. So I mean, it wasn't, at least to their credit, the lighthearted part of the of the film, but I did just appreciate it more when it was this lighthearted running joke.
Yeah, I agree. Like, there is that. I think this is one of the few films where there's a clear change in tone at the halfway point, if you get me. You know what I mean? Like, there's got that sort of Eddie's rise, and then sort of Eddie's fall from grace in the industry. You know what I mean? And by the end, you kind of hope that he sort of reclaims that glory. But I mean, yeah, it's just such a well told story spanning over a decade or two, and it's just such a. I don't think you could really make this type of film today just because it's just so, you know, of its time kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's you know, the late 90s had some fantastic films, man. They really, really did. I mean, this film, American Beauty, Fight Club, I mean, the list really does go on. And, you know, I'm sure there's ones I've forgotten about in there, but really, like,
I
it's
mean, the Matrix, whether you
Matrix.
like it or not, was massive
Yeah.
for cinema.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the late 90s and early 2000s was kind of like, yeah, changed the game. Changed the game, mate.
Yeah, because I think there's, you know, I think the 40s, the 60s, the 90s, and the 2000s are probably like the biggest eras for films ever. You know, there are sort of chasms where nothing notable came out, but you
Mm-hmm.
know, I think, you know, Citizen Kane obviously coming from the earlier years. I think it was 39. I may be getting that wrong.
I think you're right. I
You know,
think you're right. Yeah.
it was either late 30s or early 40s. But you know, Gone with the Wind, terrible intentions behind the film, but you know, it was obviously huge for cinema. And then you know, you had the 60s with films. A lot of the films we've talked about have come from the 60s. You know, some of the best.
Yeah.
And then you know, 90s. You know, as we've listed. So yeah, it is just really an incredible film, and yeah, I agree. I don't think anything quite like this will ever be captured again. And you know, there's a harrowing sort of sequence within the third act, and it's simultaneously intercut, you know, between this experimental limo pornographic film that Jack's trying to film versus, you know, Dirk, you know, now just, you know, masturbating for money, you know, because, you know, he needs his fix, you know, for his cocaine addiction. And it's just absolutely tragic. Like the
Yeah.
entire, you know, it's 10-15 minutes, like, you know, he's beaten and pulled out of his truck, and it's just absolutely harrowing. Like it
Yeah.
is really heartbreaking to
It
see, you know, all these characters that were on such a high. You know, Jack is a perfectly respectable guy. You know, he's respected within his industry. And Roller Girl, you know, is just pursuing her career. She hasn't done anything to upset anyone. She's just sort of a, you know, collateral damage to, you know, the damage that was brought on by, you know, other
yeah.
characters' intense substance abuse. So it is just harrowing seeing the aftermath of that.
Yeah, definitely, man, because like we're kind of saying, you know, it almost doesn't feel like the same film, that scene, you know what I mean? Because there's such a switch in tone there. And it actually works, do you know what I mean? Like it shows that rise and fall from grace. And I just love the fact that every character's got something sort of dark going on. And obviously Amber with like the custody battle as well. And that kind of goes into the theme of, you know, exploring the stereotype and the negative opinions people have and the negative judgments people make about people in that industry, which aren't necessarily true because, as I say, you know, it's a personal choice and it doesn't necessarily reflect the character of the person just by what job you're in. So yeah, it goes in depth and that kind of stuff. The only thing I probably would say I could be critical of the film in terms of those kind of things, I do think the film gets bogged down in a lot of unnecessary sort of scenes that you could cut out. You know, there's a lot of sort of one thing I said about the Joker, like when we reviewed it a couple of years back, was, you know, there's a lot of scenes of, you know, Arthur just smoking, just needless minutes wasted of him lighting cigarettes, and I get that kind of builds the, you know, that creates the vibe, it creates the aura of the film, but there's just too many repeated scenes of them, I think, just snorting drugs. Like one scene sort of, or a couple of scenes at least, gets that kind of addiction, you know, outlined perfectly without having to keep like show don't tell, isn't it, mate? You know, and I think they show it a little bit too much, where it kind of be like, okay, you know, we get it, he's addicted to cocaine kind of thing. You don't need to keep showing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because there are a few that, you know, are used as character development for his eventual substance abuse issues, but then there are some that are just, you know, establishing this weird mother-son sexual connection that Amber has with Dirk himself, and it's just, you know, that's more uncomfortable than it is, you know, character
Yeah.
building. I mean, I guess Amber wouldn't have much to do otherwise. You know, she sort of that is her main screen time, I suppose. You know, aside from that, you know, we only really see her within the initial sex scene of Dirk's first performance, and then you know, sort of, you know, mingling with the characters, and then eventually becoming a director. So I mean, aside from the drug abuse scenes, I guess she wouldn't have much play without them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, mate. And on that note, mate, I don't have much more to say for Boogie Nights. Have you got anything from yourself?
Just a couple of things, as with, I'd say, most of the films that we're talking about today, regardless of the industries the characters are within, they just by coincidence are frequently unpleasant. There's characters within the Escort that I find deeply unpleasant. There's characters here. There's characters in Midnight Cowboy. So it's completely irrelevant to what those films are about. But though for whatever reason, those characters are deeply unpleasant. And even though I dislike many of the characters here, I'm glad that they ended up as sort of this happy family by the end.
Yeah, definitely. You've kind of got that like band of misfits vibe going on, where like each character has problems going on, but they all everyone's so different from each other, but they work really well. And it's also worth noting here, one thing I forgot to say, movie mate's favorite Alfred Molina has a little sort of more than a cameo in here, but he's one of the few actors where you think he can't really put a foot wrong. I just love him in absolutely everything, mate. From from The Tempest to Doc Ock to in Spider-Man to whatever. I think he's absolutely fantastic, mate. He's great.
He's also a bit of a chameleon. Like, I only picked him because of his accent. Like, I don't think aside from that, I don't think I could have picked that was him based on sight.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I didn't actually notice him until I kind of look at the Wikipedia for the film as it's going along, just to make sure I'm lining things up correctly. I haven't missed anything. And yeah, like when I saw it and he was in the cast list, I was like, oh, he must have been that sort of drug guy at the end. And yeah, he was. He is kind of a comedian, mate. He's the kind of guy that like he must be in hundreds of films. You know what I mean? He's in everything.
Absolutely. I mean, he's in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and if I didn't know that in advance, I could not have told you that for any sum of money, because he looks nothing like himself. He sounds nothing like himself. But within this film, the final point I want to make is that there's an incredible phenomenon throughout this film that I would refer to as Chekhov's dick. Of course, a reference to Chekhov's gun. The idea that a gun that's seen in the first act of the play should be used by the third act of the play. And here, we hear constant reference to Dirk Diggler's sizable penis. We hear about it from the first minutes of the film. People are marveling at it. They're paying to see it. They're paying to see him use it. And I think it would have been gutting if we never got to see it. And I think it is apt that it's the closing moments of the film that we get to see this.
Yeah, just as I thought it wasn't going to show it, mate, it appears up, and I was like, well, I mean, hey, at least they didn't sort of shy away from that, even if it is a brief moment of the film. And that's actually poetic justice, mate, because that was actually my final point in the film, to be honest. It was a nice little sort of callback, shall we say.
Yeah, long before I knew anything about this film, I was sort of a connoisseur of, trying to pick up, facts about certain films. And this I had heard the fact many years ago that according to the makers of the film, the prosthetic that is seen on film is modeled after Mark Wahlberg's own penis.
Wow,
and
really?
I don't quite know how true that is. I don't know if they're saying it resembles his penis and they've extended it, or are they suggesting that he himself has a 13-inch penis? I don't know. I don't know what they're saying with that. but either way, I mean, would you just, if your penis was the same size as the prosthetic you're whipping out, and the prosthetic looks identical to your penis because it's based on your penis, wouldn't you just whip out your penis? And I've said penis too many times now.
Mate, I mean, the viewers are really getting what they want here. They're getting that in-depth analytical movie chat. I'd have to say probably, yeah. If it's like, why not just show up? I guess, personal choice, I suppose. But yeah, it's an interesting bit of movie trivia, mate, for sure.
Yeah, because I do think there is an unequal balance here of female versus male nudity. I think if you're gonna have one, you have to have the other. And you need to strike a fair balance. So that there's a lot of there's nudity from Heather Graham and from Julianne Moore. So Mark Wahlberg just needs to suck it up, I reckon.
Yeah, agreed. On that note, mate, if you were going to rate the film out of 10, what would you give it?
I think we rated the Godfather trilogy quite favorably because we were worried about getting yelled at, but I don't think anybody really watched those episodes because I don't think anybody actually likes the Godfather films. I think people say they like the Godfather films, because other people say they like them. It's this sort of chain of liars. But I think we rated that quite favorably. Goodfellas, I think is a very easy comparison to make. Because I think the
Agreed.
character that Ray Liotta plays sort of has similar shades, and I rated that film very favorably, and I fully back that decision. I imagine I gave that a 9 or a 10 out of 10. Once again, I'd go down the middle. I'd rate this equally with Midnight Cowboy and give it a 9.5.
Yeah, mate, it's a fantastic film. Probably my favorite out of the three today. I think it's got such a special quality. It's such a great sort of bunch of characters that all blend in so well. And it's worth saying, like Burt Reynolds, we didn't really mention him much, but he's absolutely phenomenal here. Like I think he's really, really good. And for me, it's far better than Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, even though I really like that film, which is a testament in itself. So I probably have to give it a 9 out of 10, mate. That's a really strong film. The film that is gonna divide people who've seen it
I can't believe this.
Is The Escort. Now, it's worth saying that I didn't completely hate. It's not like worst movie ever for me. It's just I don't know. Maybe I've maybe been a bit
No,
snobby.
commit to it, Matthew. You tell me that you're a fan of independent film. You
I
enjoyed
know.
Thanks for Sharing, and I think this is sort of in a similar vein, but an improved story, and it adds a more authentic romance. So I'd like to hear, Matthew, exactly why you didn't enjoy this film, and I'd like you to commit to whatever you say.
I will commit. Well, one thing I'll get the positives out of the way first. I think the movie's
Oh,
very
because
well.
there's so few of them. Yeah, fuck you.
Exactly. And the film's very well cast. It actually blew my mind that that Natalie was the same actress who played Katie in Kick-Ass, I think, which is
Hmm.
it's amazing.
Yeah,
Like she
Lindsay
looks,
Fonseca.
yeah, she looks
She
quite
also
different.
played Ted's daughter in How I Met Your Mother, and she
Okay.
played Peggy Carter's roommate on Agent Carter.
Okay, she's been about then. She's been in a few things. And I think there's a lot of comparisons with I think you can make with this film and others. It deals with sort of the theme of sex work probably more so than the other two in terms of it actually deals with that kind of the escort. Obviously is the titular character there. I just feel like for me this film kind of it deals with a lot of similar themes to other films that we reviewed in the channel, but it's just that the other films in your channel I just personally preferred. Like I think the film tries to go into a lot of sort of themes of obviously prostitution, but also sort of sex addiction as well. And I just think there's other films like Shame, for example, that do that way better. And Thanks for Sharing. It's just that's my personal preference. Like that's not necessarily a knock on this film. It's just that I think there's films that outline the themes better. Um, and yeah, I just thought overall it just I don't know. I thought it lacked like originality, authenticity. Like I think you could, the actor who plays Mitch. Forgive me, I didn't grab his name, but I just think you could
Yeah,
sort
I
of
didn't care to learn it. I think Mitch is a piece of shit.
I think you could just put any actor in there and they do a better job. I just didn't buy their performance whatsoever. I thought it was not good. I mean, I know.
I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
Yeah. I really want to hear where you like it though, because I respect your opinion, of course, and it's not that I want to go into dislike a film. I genuinely want to hear why you love it so much. To be fair, so
Yeah.
crack on, mate.
Well, I've seen the film 4 or 5 times now, and I was really worried this time that it wasn't going to live up to my memory of it. And I was really surprised because I did really enjoy it, but there were certain elements that I did despise. Not of the film, but well, of the characters. I do think Mitch is an absolute twat, and I'm sure we'll get into it. And I do agree. It's not. Obviously, you can't say that it handles sex addiction, in the same way that it does in Shame, because that film's 2 hours. It's all about that. Here, you
Yeah,
have that sort of
that's fair.
divided attention, but between these two characters who are dealing with their own sexual journeys. But I have to agree with you, Mitch. Piece of shit. I love Natalie, but Mitch is awful. He clearly believes like he's the main character, and that is what the film wants you to believe. He's the point of view character, but he really doesn't deserve to be. Like he sneers at the inference that he's normal. But his personality is aggressively average. His sex addiction is the only thing that makes him atypical to, anyone else, in the building in which he works. Aside from that, he is just a boring office wanker, who has no personality. He's not funny. He has nothing positive to offer the relationship between him and Natalie that they form by the end.
Yeah, and one thing I kind of say about the fact, and this isn't necessarily a criticism, like it does kind of, I think it would almost work better as like a Black Mirror style episode where it's more of a, if you shorten down the runtime, and I know this film is only like 90 minutes long, but I would even sort of shorten out the runtime further and kind of have it deal with those themes just more vibrantly and more passionately. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of scenes where I try to feel like they try to condense you of the Mitch and Natalie dynamic, but for me it just doesn't work because I think Natalie is just so much better. Like she deserves way better because I just think she's such a great character, and I really would love if the film just went full on, with her story rather than have Mitch as the point of view character, because I think her character is just so much infinitely more appealing, more better, just better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I mean, in the end, her efforts help him get his job, but all he does
Yeah.
is accelerate her timeline of quitting being an escort. But that's just because she was successful in her academic in her academic approach. So I mean, it had nothing to do with him. Like, I have no idea why she agreed to the arrangement to begin with, because she doesn't seem to be gaining anything from it. Aside, I guess maybe she wanted a friend, and that isn't necessarily explicitly stated. You've said about the runtime, and I massively appreciate anything that can tell a story as well as a 2 hour film in 90 minutes. Because it does feel like you're in and out with this film. Whether
Yeah.
you enjoyed it or not, like you felt it was over quickly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's always, it's always bizarre when you compare Boogie Nights in this film. Like Boogie Nights is like an hour longer, and it's nice when you watch a film like this and you get to the 45-minute mark and you kind of think, oh, we've only got another 45 minutes left. Like it's nice and brief. Whereas like normally with a movie, if you hit the 45-minute mark, you're like, oh, I've got another like hour and a half of this or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's nice and brief, and I actually think that benefits the film in a sense because the story, I think the pacing of the film is actually quite good. You know what I mean? There's no real dull moments. Like it's pretty, from scene to scene to scene. And yeah, I mean, like I say, it almost does feel like that sort of Black Mirror style episode where it is like a self-contained story that's told in a brief way, which I was thankful for. Similar to Don John, which deals with similar themes. That it's a
Yeah.
short movie as well. So yeah.
Yeah, this film, once again, I appreciate so much about this film. And by this point, we've talked a lot about sex scenes, and here, that there are a few. There's scenes between Mitch and other people, and between Natalie and other people. But the fascinating thing is that the central romance between two people who enjoy sex, that they never share one.
Yeah.
The sex we see them have, throughout is arbitrary to them. For Mitch, it's to feed addiction, and for Natalie, it's for money. That they enjoy it, but it doesn't equate to intimacy. So the romantic scenes that they share, I think, are so much more vital.
Yeah, that's a great point, mate. That's what brings them together, isn't it? That's actually a really good point because like I think the characters are so different. It's just for me, they were almost too different in the sense that I couldn't really buy it happening. But then I suppose at the same time, like it's a nice sort of metaphor for that. They're kind of different dynamics or different approaches to things like sex. And yeah, it is, to be fair. Like I think the film does have strong points in each individual character. I just feel like when the two characters come together, it just doesn't work for me. But that being said, I still think the performances by a lot of people are great. Namely Bruce Campbell's in this as well, which was fun because I think this is the only film I've seen of it other than the Spider-Man films.
Yeah, can I just quickly grab my charger?
Yeah, of course you can, mate.
So, in the previous films we've talked about, we don't really understand the motives necessarily of the characters for entering the sex work industry. In Midnight Cowboy, we assume it's just because Joe Buck believes he can be successful. In Boogie Nights, it's because Eddie, has been sort of convinced by his mom that he can't really do anything. So he decides to put his one talent to good use. But here, we actually have a more upsetting and more unsettling motivation for Natalie. She has a very upsetting past. But I feel the way that she, empowered herself through her sexuality is quite inspiring. She says, she was shamed for her sexual, for being sexually active, so she embraced that and decided to, get paid for
Yeah.
enjoying sex. So I mean, of course, it's sad that that happened to her, but the fact that she was able to find any positivity in it, because she doesn't seem to dislike her job for the vast majority of the film.
Yeah, and that's
There's a few instances where of course clients take things too far. Aside from that, she says, she enjoys the sex, at times, and she likes how much it pays.
yeah, and that's why I think she's probably the best character in the film for me, just because she is so empowering and things like that. And the film doesn't, to be fair to the film, it doesn't shy away from any of those to what some people would consider taboo audiences. Like, I think probably these days to have a film that deals with those kind of themes, like probably a lot of people would probably be embarrassed to see this film with their partner, not because of the themes, but just because it is a bit of a taboo thing in society, which is probably unfair. Like as I say, it's something that pretty much everyone engages in. So why not watch a film about it? You know what I mean? Why not see? Why not? Do you know what I mean? Like it's not that often these type of films that we're reviewing today are box office hits or anything like that. That it's usually like all the films that deal with these themes, be it sex addiction or sex work, like they don't get sequels. You know what I mean? They don't do very well, and I think that is because people are probably a little bit embarrassed to see them either on their own or with someone else. Do you feel the same?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I have only watched these films in private. Haven't been like, mother, father, gather around, let us watch Boogie Nights together,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
probably a wise decision. But yeah, I agree. You feel uncomfortable. Seeing this in the film. I feel uncomfortable seeing romance films in the cinema. Because who do I call upon? Do I say? I mean, I ended up seeing like Bridget Jones's Baby with my parents and then my sister. To very very poor choices on my part. But who else am I going to see with myself? I feel like that's weirder. So I can't even call upon my friend Matthew. If I want to see a romance film, because weird. So if I was like, hey Matthew, do you want to see the latest critical hit? It's all about sex. Sex work. I do feel like we'd be uncomfortable seeing it, which is a shame, because as we can see, especially from Boogie Nights, I'd say, you know, there's masterful storytelling there.
definitely, mate, definitely. I don't blame anyone for feeling a little bit like embarrassed or anything with these kind of films because, like, as I say, it's not something that it's everyone's open to talking about because it is quite a private thing, which I respect, and I certainly feel that way. Um, I mean, yeah, like this film, you can tell like there's not exactly a huge budget behind it. Not in the fact that it looks bad, it looks very good, but even I think it's very clear to the eye. You can tell like it's not on the same level of a Don John or something where it's got huge actors here with a massive budget behind it. If that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. You can sense the small budget, casting, runtime, setting, everything like that. But aside from that, the film is filmed beautifully.
Yeah,
It's not overtly seedy, in its style like Boogie Nights is, because it's sort of showing, it leans into showing the darker side of that industry. Whereas here, there's a sense of positivity and empowerment in it, and then with shades of the negative aspects of that, where the clients are overtly aggressive.
yeah,
Aside from that, it's just Natalie's means of making money. So it's not glorifying anything, which I think we did see a certain level of that, especially in the sex addiction episode where it was kind of like, oh well, with sex addiction you got to have a lot of sex. I feel like that was the shades of certain characters in Thanks for
yeah.
Sharing, especially. I feel like they were sort of glorifying it a little bit, but here, there's no glamorization, but and I think that there might be a level of confusion there that if your film looks good, it's like you're saying that everything's happy and positive. But I'd say especially with you know less so with the sex work. I think this film is really more a sex addiction film than it is a sex work film, because I feel like Mitch is unfortunately the main character, and I feel like he gets more screen time, and really he's just overcoming certain struggles in his life through Natalie, rather than the other way around, because really she just, she improves herself. She doesn't need anyone else, which is, why I think we would both agree she's a better character. But it's not shame level of, showing the debilitating effects of sex addiction on relationships. But I do think it gives an admirable shot at it in the runtime.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I mean, and naturally, I think there's going to be a bit of crossover with the themes that we discussed in this episode, but also in our sex addiction episode. I think they're two interlinked podcasts there, and it stands to reason like this film. To be fair, compared to the other two, I think this one explores a bigger variety of themes. To be fair, just because the two main characters are so different from each other. And and they do say like opposites attract and things like that, but me personally, I didn't buy the Mitch Natalie dynamic as much as I wanted to, and I think that it probably is because of the actor who plays Mitch just lets the side down for me a little bit. I'm sure he's a lovely guy. It's just I thought the level of performance from the other half of that relationship was just that much better. There's a level, I think there's a level above. That being said, I think looking over the film with you, like, it's made me appreciate certain things about it, but it's just I really did want to like it because I know you liked it. It's just when I compare it to the other two films today, I think there's just a level difference there for me personally, whereas this film just doesn't hit the heights that I wanted it to.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I have talked myself out of it a little, and you, I think, have raised some good points that
It's what we do, mate. It's what we do.
It does, yeah. It handles more themes than, say, Midnight Cowboy. It is sort of in isolation. It's about cynicism, sort of balanced with sort of Joe Buck's idealism and hope for moving to the big city. He thinks that means big things for him, but really it just means absolute heartbreak, and disappointment, and that is sort of a tragic film. And that you can sort of summarize what happens there quite easily. Here, there's more stuff, there's more pieces at play, but I suppose the more you have, the more watered down things are going to be, and then you throw the runtime into the mix, and then you have even less time to deal with multiple serious themes. So I will humbly admit, I don't think it handles them expertly. I did really enjoy it, but if you hate the main character when I don't think you're meant to, there's maybe an issue.
And I suppose on that note, Callum, do you have anything more to say in the film?
Just briefly, I do think, I think we're both big fans of independent films, romance films, and this is a blend of the two. And I do, I have my reservations about the quality after having discussed it with you. And I do think it is dropping out of the top 10, while some of the ones that we've talked about today maybe encroach on that. But I do have to say, I think that this film, despite admitted faults, I think it has the perfect ending. Like, I think you can't do an ending better than this. For an independent romance film, of course, like Midnight Cowboy, I think its ability to break your heart is much more meaningful than just, oh, it's happy and they get together. It obviously has less meaning, but in the context of the narrative they've presented, the fact that they get together, even if you don't like Mitch, even if you don't think he's good enough for Natalie, it's heartwarming. It makes you feel good, and that's what a romance should do, despite the difficult themes that it's straddling. I always feel that like independent films are strong throughout and then fall down completely with the ending. But in this film, despite I've referred to Mitch as a cockroach, despite him being a real twat, I do think it is the perfect conclusion to this narrative.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's something that certainly has to be said about those romantic cliches and of the happy endings, but everyone loves it. You know what I mean? That's why they're so successful and popular. And I'm certainly a big sucker for it, mate, to be honest with you. And yeah, I agree. I think a film that ends strong is always better than a film that starts strong but ends weakly for me. So I thought the ending too ended on a stronger note than when it began. Certainly.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it makes perfect sense as an ending for this film. So I think if you didn't like most of the film, you're probably not gonna like the ending either. Like, it's not like it's a groundbreaking moment in cinema where they recovered this flawed film with the perfect ending. It's just the perfect ending for this film. So I understand if you still have your big reservations about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's good. A lot of the films, well, I think the three films that we're talking about today, like there is room for rewatchability to all three of them, even if I did prefer the other two. So I think I'd definitely be excited, in a couple of years' time, just to look back in these episodes in the Sex Section episode and kind of have a little rewatch and see where my thoughts lie then.
Yeah, I don't think I see myself watching this film alone. Again, I've seen it 4 or 5 times. I think if I were to ever watch this again, it'd probably be introducing it to someone else, as I've done with you today, to mixed results. So I imagine that the next time, if I watch it again, then the next time I do, I imagine it'll be to introduce it to someone else.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about film as well, and especially reviewing more independent films that not many people have seen, like to give that opportunity to see it show a film that you like, to other people. Like I always have like a weird sense of like pride when I'm like introducing like a specific like music artist to someone who hasn't like heard him or her before, because like I kind of have this big expectation of I want them, whoever I'm showing it to like them as much as I do, which unfortunately wasn't the case for me with this film, but I'm glad to say that with the other two films I really enjoyed them.
Yeah, I think most of my recommendations have gone down well, except this and The Voices.
The Voices, I think, that'll be.
I can't get over that. Like I still can't see a single fault in The Voices. Like you have definitely talked me out of The Escort, but the Voices I can't get behind. Unfortunately,
I think The Voices is definitely better than this film. Maybe looking back, I was maybe a bit too harsh on The Voices. But yeah, any more comments made in the film?
Nothing else for me, Matthew. I expected to go in today and say top 10 films, perfect film, 10 out of 10. But I can't honestly do that anymore.
I feel bad. I feel horrifically bad.
I saw the faults. I saw the faults as I was watching it. I asked you to watch the film. I thought, this is an amazing film. I love it. Matthew will love it. And then when I watched it, I was like, oh, I fucking hate Mitch. And he's a big deal to the film because he's the main character, unfortunately. And I was like, wow, I think this film wants us to like him and think that, they deserve each other, but they really don't. And I think that was sort of a big issue. So I did have some problems with it, but I still appreciated the quick runtime. I mean, it's sort of a weird thing to say about a film that you actually like, that you were, that, it was nice that it was over quickly. But that is me just, with my level of attention span. I can't really sit still or look at anything for too long. I appreciate it, everything that I've loved about it in the past. But so some cracks started to appear. So I'd probably give the film an 8. But I think if I watched it again, it may well go down.
I mean, I feel like I've just told my son that Santa's not real or something. Like I feel so bad. I feel so bad. I like But yeah, I think there's a lot to
at least we got 2 masterpieces to replace it with.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. I think credit to the film. I think it deals with a lot more complex themes and certainly a wider variety of themes than the other two films today. It's just that I felt performance wise and just the characters didn't flow as nicely as they did with Boogie Nights and of course Midnight Cowboy. So for me, it probably would balance out at around a 6 out of 10. But, I know, I'm sorry, mate.
What did you give The Voices? Was it less or more, do you think?
See, looking back, I probably should rate The Voices a bit higher.
I feel like you probably rated it like not terribly because I'd given you like such a bollocking throughout the episode.
It's not often that we disagree majorly in film, so I always like to get into a good discussion about it. And
it's happened a bit recently. Like Black Widow was a bit of a bust up.
That's true. Black Widow as well. Yeah, and there's been a few episodes of Loki, I think, where I said it one episode was my favorite and it was your least favorite, and vice versa or whatever. So, but yeah, stay tuned later on this week, guys, for obviously the Loki finale. I don't know. It depends what really happens in an episode, mate. But I mean, it's unlikely to be a podcast, but you never know with us. To be fair, I think the WandaVision finale was a podcast, so don't be surprised. I guess if it is viewers. Also, Riverdale's back this week, I think. So that'll be.
Unfortunately, not Matthew. I'm sorry.
No.
It's like because it was meant to be back last week, and I wasn't wrong about that. It was meant to be back last week, but then they've postponed it a month, and it's not back until like the 11th of August or something.
Sneaky move. Well, stay tuned anyway, guys, for the Loki review, and yeah, as I say, 100th podcast episode's coming up too, so that should be that should be fun. But yeah, thank you very much for today, Callum. Appreciate your
Thank you.
time, and thank you very much, viewers, for everyone who's watched this. If you haven't seen our sex section episode, it's quite similar to this one with a good variety of films and similar discussion. So yeah, go check out that as well. And yeah, you can check out our other themed episodes in our themed episode playlist. But yeah,
what were the 3 films we had? We had Shane. Thanks for sharing. And what was the third one?
Alfie. I think Alfie was decent.
Alfie, yeah.
Alfie was decent.
It was barely a sex addiction episode. He was just a twat. Like, you know, he was just he was a womanizer. I don't think he was necessarily addicted to sex, but he was a real piece of shit.
Yeah, looking back, that was a good slate of films. To be fair, the themed episodes are always my favorite. To be fair, I really do like them. But yeah,
got a lot coming up soon that I have planned.
I'm excited. What is I suppose for the viewers, like, what is coming up this week apart from Loki? What did you have in mind? I suppose if we're gonna have a bit, well, I'll say just candidly, what were you thinking?
Well, the next episode I had down for a podcast was unnamed characters. You know, characters who appear in film but are never given a name. You know, there's the girl in the 7-Year Itch. There's the jury within 12 Angry Men, and then there's the driver in Drive. So I hope that will be the next episode.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I think hopefully, because we've got like the Fast and the Furious out of the way, like more themed episodes will hopefully be coming for you guys, which I think they're some of our favorites, because the unconventional romances, the romantic comedies, time loops, like they're all some of my favorite ones we've done. So yeah, I really like doing the themed ones. But yeah, thanks very much for today, guys. Hope you guys are all well with family and friends, all safe and well too. Take care, and we'll see you later.
Bye-bye.